Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Poseys. Today's video is a lot of fun. I am pattern testing a historical pattern based on an actual garment from Kenna Sews. A few weeks ago, she put out a request on her Instagram page for pattern testers for this plus-sized garment. It is a 1910 dressing jacket or dressing sack. So it's a casual garment that would be worn around the house or when you were getting dressed or when you were, doing things around the house. And I'm really excited to show you the process of putting this together. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. This is a PDF pattern, so I first printed, taped it together, and then cut it out. My fabric for this project is a cotton blend shirting. I got my pieces all cut out and ready to get started. The pattern doesn't include seam allowance, so I added that. After cutting out my pieces, I transferred all of the markings. The short ends of the belt are folded under and ironed before folding the belt lengthwise and ironed. I found it interesting that the original garment that Kenna based this pattern on just had the raw edge folded under and top stitched down, rather than folded in towards each other and secured between the two layers of the belt. The front pieces have pleats at the shoulders which are sewn down. Welt seams are used at the shoulder seams. The front and back seam allowance is folded opposite directions and sewn with 2 rows of stitching, encasing both raw edges. The pattern included a handy diagram, which I appreciated since it had been a long time since I'd done a welt seam. The center front edges were turned twice and top stitched down, but I neglected to film that part. The back piece has an inverted box pleat in the center back. I pinned it first and tested before sewing the pleat. I ironed the pleat and the rest of the back before ironing the seam allowance down at the shoulder seam to prepare for assembling the welt seams. The belt is secured to the center back over the inverted box pleat. I'd like to send a heartfelt thanks to my monthly coffee supporters. I appreciate your support so much. The first step of assembly is pinning and sewing the welt seams at the shoulders. Next, I got ahead of myself and sewed the side seams. They are supposed to be sewn all in one go with the sleeve seams, so I got my seam rippers out and unpicked those side seams. Starting with the sleeve cuffs, I turned and ironed the top long edge of each cuff over. I gave the sleeves a quick ironing before attaching the cuffs. The sleeves are attached with welt seams as well, so I ironed the seam allowance on the sleeve heads and arm size in opposite directions. Navigating the curved shape was a bit tricky. My next step was pinning and sewing the sleeve heads in with welt seams. The cuff instructions were the only part of this whole pattern that confused me. It could have just been user error, but also this was the first draft of the pattern. So I looked at the reference photos of the cuffs and attached them how it made sense to me. I'm not sure if it was correct, but it worked out. After sewing the cuffs to the bottom of the sleeves, I turned the cuffs up to the outside and top stitched them in place. The side seams and sleeve seams are done in one go, so I pinned and sewed one. Incorrectly? Wrong sides together. Ah well, seam ripping time again. I did a quick try on and realized that I had attached the belt too high on the back. I unpicked it and reattached it where it was supposed to be. Okay, everything is going really well, except for couple of tiny little mistakes, which I have since rectified, but all that's left now is to put the collar on and then hem and then some closures and then it's done. The original garment is completely machine sewn, but I had a few minutes waiting for students on Zoom, so I sewed the center back seam of the collar by hand with a back stitch. The raw edge of the collar is turned and ironed under and trim is attached. They are sewn at the same time with a top stitch. I chose to baste the collar on. This was an extra step not in the instructions, but it gave me peace of mind that when I sewed on the twill tape to cover the raw edges, the collar wouldn't wiggle out of place. Hercules lent his support on this part. The pattern suggests using bias tape for finishing the collar on the inside, but I didn't have any and I didn't feel like making any. I used twill tape instead and it worked out just fine. I sewed the twill tape to the right side of the collar, then turned it to the inside, covering the raw edges, and secured it in place. On to the final steps. I turned up a narrow hem and sewed it. The original garment has a button for closure at the neck, but I didn't have enough room since I didn't alter the pattern at all, and I don't have much overlap at the center front. I chose a hook and eye. To close the belt, I used a hook and bar. A button would work just as well. Then it was done. Big thanks to Kenna for giving me the opportunity to pattern test. I really enjoyed testing this pattern. It does have a lot of ease if you are closer to the suggested measurements. If I were to make another, I would make some adjustments. I would lengthen it a bit, add a couple of inches to give myself more room, and widen the arm size, sleeves, and neckline a bit. It fits okay with no adjustments, but I think I would like a bit more ease, and then it would have a blousier effect. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to follow Kenna Sews on Instagram and Facebook. I will link all of that information below, and you can find out when the final version of this pattern is released. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you spending your time with me. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and if you'd like to be notified whenever I upload, you can hit that little bell icon. To support the channel further, I have a Ko-fi account, and that is linked down below. Again, thank you so much, and I will see you on our next sewing adventure. Bye!